Hello and a warm welcome to this podcast. David Marshall here from the Seth Network England and the Conscious Creation Academy. And today we're talking about the intellect. One of the reasons I love the Seth material is because it's really, really practical. I certainly have based all of my life around learning about how to create events and how to solve problems, hopefully minimizing uncomfortable events in my life. But if events do come up, I always go back to the inner self to actually solve the problem and kind of hopefully have the intellect in the right place. And that's what I wanted to talk about today, because a lot of people struggle because they still use the intellect to try and solve problems, and it just doesn't work. It's not the right thing for the job, and it's something that will always lead to struggle and stress. So here's a quote from Seth just to start off, and this is talking about the kind of idea that people had, that the intellect is the way to understand everything, and another school of thought which is very new age, which is, it's all about love and light, and that we shouldn't think about anything at all. And so the idea of this podcast is really to place them to say that, we are a gestalt. We've got different parts of ourselves, and outer ego, inner ego. They're all names that we use them. So they're all connected. They're all part of the one thing. But actually, by understanding and naming them, we get to kind of maybe place them in the right place. And certainly, for me, not using the intellect to solve problems is a real lifesaver. It saves a lot of time and stress and worry. So here's the quote from Seth. He says, one school believes the conscious mind and the intellect have all the answers. But to this school, this means that the conscious mind is analytical above all, and that it can find all the answers through reason alone. The other school believes that the answers are in feelings and emotion. Both are wrong. Intellect and feeling together make up your existence. But the fallacy is particularly in the belief that the aware mind must be analytical above all, as opposed to, for example, the understanding or assimilation of intuitive psychic knowledge. Neither school understands the flexibility and the possibilities that are inherent within the conscious mind, and mankind has barely begun to use its potentials. And so for me, that was something that was really good to know, that I didn't actually have to think my way out of all the problems. In fact, that it was actually unnecessary, unhelpful, and really couldn't do it. And I think that's one of the useful things about going through this process. So I'm going to talk for 5-10 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, about my own experiences and why you should be dropping the intellect, connecting it to other parts, accepting it's part of the process that you're using here within physical reality, but it certainly isn't the first port of call for solving problems or understanding reality. So the intellect is to be used, and is used essentially to focus on dealing with the camouflage. So dealing with reality. So, moving the mouse and typing and counting things and looking at the clock and understanding the time, all this kind of stuff. So that's how the intellect, not the mind, we're just going to say the intellect, that's the best use of the intellect, which is to solve problems that are of the camouflage system, if you like, how to untie the knot on my laces and all those types of things. That's the best use of the intellect, because the intellect is very, very limited. And it wasn't until I realized how limited it was by going into those inner portions of myself and realizing what a tiny, essential, but tiny portion of the reality that I'm using in order to live in this reality. So the intellect, Seth kind of uses those terms in terms of outer ego and inner ego. So the outer ego is the portion that faces physical reality. So the portion, I'm sitting here in my front room here, and I can see, my computer and the television and the couch and my light and all this kind of stuff. That's my ego's facing that way. But I've also got an inner ego, and that's the portion just as real that faces inwardly. And there are two aspects to myself, and the intellect belongs to the portion that faces outer ego, the portion that faces into this reality. And so the job of the intellect is to evaluate physical reality. So say I wanted to earn £100,000, or I wanted a particular car, or I wanted to watch a particular program, or whatever it would be, doesn't matter. Then what the intellect does is it tells me whether I've achieved it or not. it can look at a bank balance and see the numbers. It can look on a television and see if I'm getting what, the program that I want, or I'm moving my microphone in the right way, this type of thing. So it's supposed to evaluate reality. Because if, say, I'm going to pick up my cup of coffee here and I want to put it down on the left-hand side, then it's the intellect that allows me to evaluate whether it's on the left or the right, and then make decisions and change it. And the difficulty is that we try and use the intellect to solve bigger problems and to create things. And the issue with that is that unless you integrate the intellect with the outer ego and with the broader self, then it gets a real feeling of isolation. I don't know if you've ever felt overwhelmed, or if you've ever felt how to solve a problem, or things just seemed too much, or that type of thing. And that's because there's an over-reliance on the intellect to solve the problem. And the main issue with that is the intellect actually cannot solve the problem. So you're asking it to do something completely unnatural, asking it to do the impossible, and it will stretch and it will strain to go into it. And how it stretches and strains is by focusing on something. So to solve a problem with the intellect, if you think about it, is to focus on it. Now, the more you focus on something and the more that you focus on the problem, what I'm going to say here, you get what you focus on. The problem simply goes deeper and becomes more embedded in your reality. Now, when you don't use the intellect and you use the other resources that are available to you, most of those are not focusing on the problem. And if they are, then they're focusing on dumbing down the issue and then focusing on the solution. So two completely different ways of operating, two completely different ways to solve problems. And if you're into the law of attraction, obviously into the Seth material and all those types of things, we're learning how to create. And we know that one of the main things is you get what you focus on. I think it doesn't say you get what you focus on, there's no other rule. So that's the problem with the intellect. The intellect, by nature, when you ask the intellect to solve a problem, you ask it to focus on the problem. And of course, that causes more of the problem. So what do you do? Okay, so that's a good question. What do you do? Well, what I advise you to do is to forget the intellect. And it might be tricky and you might not be able to do it at the start, but I suggest that you actually disregard the intellect completely to problem solve. I'm not saying you're not going to use it to turn the TV on or count the money or pay somebody or whatever it is, but actually for problem solving. Okay, like how do I do this, and what's the best garage to go through for my car service, or actually how am I going to get from there to there? How's that going to work out? All that kind of stuff. What I suggest you do is stop asking the intellect to work that out, because you're going to focus on the problem, and any fears or concerns or worries will get focused on, and they will get compounded. So what I suggest you do is actually resolve to use your inner self. Resolve to use the inner ego, the broader self, in order to actually create and solve the problem. So what practically speaking, what is that? Okay, so say you've got an issue with something, or you want to say yes, a problem comes up. Well, the first thing you do is accept that you created it. Remember, you're in that probability for a reason, and only you perceive your own personal reality. We all take part in a mass reality, but out of that, you are the only one that perceives that particular reality, that state of consciousness. And therefore, it's about you. You choose the probabilities that go into that reality. So once you've accepted that, the first thing to do is to relax. That's what I want you to do. Just relax. Every time I have an issue and I talk to Aaron, my broader self, that's been around with me for a very long time, the first thing I get is relax. I've got a major issue right now in my life involving one of my children, something that's desperately, desperately challenging. But I have to relax about it. I have to, because if I don't relax, if I focus on it, it's going to make the issue worse. How it's come about, I'm still working out. But I do know, however challenging it is for me, and it is challenging, that the first thing I need to do is relax. So that's what I suggest you do. Because only when you relax do the inner resources begin to take hold. Okay, only when you relax do you allow them to come into different aspects of yourself and the creative process to happen. And by relaxing, you're taking the focus off the problem and you're focusing on yourself. essentially. And there is a great exercise in the Seth material where it says actually ignoring the issue is something that's really truly practically helpful, because by ignoring it, which you actually won't be able to do it 100%, but by ignoring it, what you do is you take all the energy out of it, you take the focus of it, and a lot of the times actually ignoring something will simply go away. So relax and allow the inner resources to begin to work. How do you do that? Well, just by telling yourself, just by sitting down and imagine that you're connected to this beautiful, incredible inner being that is you, of course, and tell yourself not to worry and that you're not going to use the intellect to solve this, because you've got a much, much better resource in order to help you. Now, what will happen then is that the intellect will relax. Okay, when I stopped trying to use my intellect to solve problems, I felt a palpable relaxation in my head, in my mind, in my skull, in my energy. It just dropped. It was like, wow, thank you. That is just incredible. You mean I don't have to solve every problem? No, and the answer is no, because you can't. You're never meant to. The issue that we think we're meant to is because we're taught to do that in school, to solve a problem by focusing on it. But that, of course, is counterproductive. Okay, so you ignore the issue and then you take whatever action you need to take. Okay, so my daughter wasn't very well. She had to go to hospital. So I didn't ignore that. I took her to hospital and I tried to relax when that process was happening and as it was going along. And that process allowed me to take a lot of the pressure and therefore not to make it any worse, in that probability, not to feed the issue, if you like. So the first thing you do is you take responsibility, knowing that it's your reality. The second thing is relax. Third thing is tell yourself that not to worry about it today. You can worry about it another day, but pull yourself into the present and focus on what's going on around you. That really does help you by noticing what's going on in your immediate surroundings. Then you take whatever actual practical action you need to take. Now, once you've done that, then you're kind of so you've got a little bit of a respite and going, what do I need to do now? Now, your intellect might then go into action going, you need to do this, this, and this. What I suggest you do is just gently, beautifully, lovingly just say, you know what? Actually, intellect, you don't have to solve this. You might have to help me a little bit, but you don't have to solve it. And I know when I talk to my intellect responds, because it's a state of consciousness within itself. It's a portion of my creation, if you like. It's a part of me cooperating with myself. So what I then do is I then take some time out, I sit and relax, and that's when I go into the creative process. So as I've talked about in other podcasts, will sit, I will bring up lots of lovely feelings and lots of things, and I will attach the outcome that I want. So my daughter coming out of hospital, healthy and happy. So that I attach that, and when I imagine that, when I imagine that happening, I don't force that. I just allow my imagination to come up with the image. There's a distinct difference. This is just my way. It may be different for you. But if I imagine her walking out of, say, the hospital in a particular way, wearing a particular whatever it is, I find that that's my intellect again. I'm focusing on it using my intellect. So what I do is I tell my imagination to actually create it itself, and that I'm not going to get involved at the intellectual level. And that seems to work a lot better for me. And I think it's because I'm tuning into other portions of myself that actually know how that can work, how that probability can come about much more easily, again, than my intellect. I hope that makes sense. Then I act in line. I kind of follow the breadcrumbs, as I said in other podcasts. I act in line. I talk as if the problem's going to be solved ASAP, knowing that the probability is there for it to be solved. And that's what I do, and that's the process. But 90% of that is not intellectual at all. Maybe 95% isn't intellectual at all. What I tend to do is simply allow life to go by. And so because the intellect is isolated in time, okay, it can only see the present moment, and the inner self is not, that means that the inner self's much better at getting in touch with those probabilities, using the imagination in order to create what the mind is telling it to create. The intellect also doesn't know how events are formed. I don't know how I'm speaking this at all. My intellect takes no part in the process, except when I'm going to hit, record or whatever it is. Well, then it does. And how many gigabytes this takes on the server and all that kind of stuff, But at the end of the day, the intellect has no idea, and I'm not going to ask it to get involved. What I am going to tell it to do is relax, because help is at hand. The inner self knows exactly how events are formed, and that's therefore where I'm going to go in order to create other events. Finally, also, the intellect can't actually create anything. Okay, the inner self creates everything, so that's the way to go. So what's your job in amongst all of this kind of stuff? Well, it's actually to stop using the intellect and start using the inner self. Okay, remember, the intellect is beautiful. It's an incredible portion of the gestalt of who you are. But the inner self is far more powerful, and only the inner self has the ability to create the things that you want to create. So stop focusing on solving the problems intellectually, relax, start ignoring as much as you possibly can. To be honest, 97% of what goes on in the reality that I experience is complete background noise to me. I don't pay any attention to it whatsoever unless I want to focus on it and begin to kind of grow it, you know? It's like looking in a forest and ignoring 90% of the trees or the plants and then just focusing on the 3% that I really want to grow and I really want to nurture, because if I focus on the other 97%, I'm not going to have enough energy to focus into those 3. So try and make everything try and make as much as you can background noise, reduce the drama, because then your intellect can relax. It can take its rightful place within you, which is softly within the self, just playing the role it is, allowing itself to connect with that inner self and to relax, to not have to solve all the problems. And I guarantee you will be more relaxed, because you will not be asking yourself to, your intellect, to do things it's impossible to do. So I hope that makes sense to you. There's quite a lot of information in there. I have no idea actually how long. Let's use my intellect to find out how long that's going on for. That's about 15 minutes or so. But just to summarize, the intellect doesn't know how to create anything. It's only there created to deal with the camouflage. Okay, the camouflage, the physical reality. And therefore, actually, to solve the problem, you need to go inward. You need to ignore as much as you can of this reality. It's just background noise. It comes and it goes. And focus your attention lovingly on the 3% that really matters to you. But do it in a relaxed way. And when you have problems or issues or challenges, then tell yourself to relax, go inward, and allow your imagination and your inner self to create the magical creations and tune into those probabilities that exists where you are happy, healthy, relaxed, as will be your family and everybody else. Okay, I hope that makes sense to you. Have a great day. If you've got any questions on this, then let me know. If you can subscribe to the podcast, please do. And I'm giving away a free book now on my website, the Conscious Creation Academy, a story that I wrote, inspired actually by just one line in one of the Seth books, just touched me inwardly, and I wrote a book that came out of all that kind of stuff. So it's such a pleasure to write as well. So it's called The Dream We Call Earth, and you're welcome to have a copy. Okay, that's it. Have a great day. Take care. Speak soon. Bye-bye.